So, Elias.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for having me today and joining and seeing all these, some of you familiar faces and some new faces for me. I'm sure most of you or some of you been to Holy Land Trust before or to the Holy Land in general. And I'm happy here to share my story and the work we're doing and give you update about the situation in Palestine. And I'm happy to seeing all these different faces from different backgrounds. This is really makes me happy and give me a lot of hope that we can all live together, even like behind these screens, but at least we can tonight, the session tonight actually is a model for human beings living in this universe. And this is what makes and gives me hope as a person here living in Palestine. Thank you, Saadiya, for the introduction. And I just give you a little bit about, for those who don't know me, like I am Elias, and Elias is the Arabic version of the biblical name of Elijah, or Elias in Islam, Eliyahu in Hebrew, and Elias as well in Christianity, Elias. I was born and raised in the little town of Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, to a Christian family. And I introduce myself as well. I identify myself as I am an Arab Palestinian Christian. And for most of the international community, this is something confusing or doesn't make sense. How come you're an Arab, you're a Palestinian, and you're a Christian? And I have three identities, I can say. My cultural identity is an Arab identity because my native language is an Arabic language, and my culture belongs to the Arabic culture and heritage. So I identify my cultural identity as an Arab. For anyone who speaks Arabic and anyone who lives in the Middle East in one of these 22 Arab countries, identify himself as an Arab. It doesn't matter if you are Christian, if you're black, if you're white, if you're Jew. If you are a citizen of one of these Arab countries and you identify your language as first language as an Arabic, and you identify your culture as an Arab culture, so you are an Arab. And my second identity is a Palestinian. My nationality is a Palestinian. I was born in Palestine. I have my Palestinian ID, my Palestinian passport, and I identify myself as a Palestinian because I was born in Palestine. So there is an Algerian Arab, there is a Jordanian Arabs, and this has nothing to do with your religion. It's your national identity. And the third identity that I have is my faith, which is also one of my important identity for most of the people living in the Middle East is religion. And my religious identity is a Christian. My faith, my spiritual practice is a Christian practice. So I go to the church and I believe in Jesus, and this has nothing to do with my Arabic culture and with my Palestinian identity. So in Palestine, we have a mixture of Muslim, Christian, and Jew, and we identify ourselves as Palestinian. We, as a Muslim and Christian living in Palestine, we share the same. We have a common culture, which means we're an Arab. So these are identities I always insist to tell and share with the international, just to identify, because what happened after, I can say that the turn point in the history was 9/11, when the terror attacks happening in the US, the international community labeled all Arabs as a terror, and they labeled all the Muslims as a terror. And this need like to raise awareness about who we are as an Arab. We have, if you say if you are an Arab, it doesn't mean you are a terrorist or you are a Muslim as well, because not the Muslim are terrorists. Like have like these radical groups that are committing terror attacks, which has nothing to do with Islam. And also, not all the Arabs are related to these terror groups. And when you think about the Arab people, you should think that there's a Jewish Arab, and there is an Israeli, like an Christians and Muslim. We have Druze, we have Samaritans, we have Baha'i, we have all different kinds of groups that they're living in the Arab countries, and they identify themselves as an Arab. So this is one of the points that I always like to share first. So as an Arab Palestinian Christian, I was growing, I was raised in Palestine, witnessing what is called the Israeli military occupation since my childhood. I was born in 1981, and in that time, Israel, the Palestinians were living fully under the Israeli military occupation. I don't know, you're familiar with the history, I assume. So from 1967, Israel occupied the West Bank, Gaza, and the Golan Heights, and these became the occupied territories, which is fully under the Israeli military occupation. And we as a Palestinian living in these territories, we are fully under the Israeli military control. So what I was witnessing as a child is seeing the Israeli military and Israeli soldiers like hitting the city, arresting people, and doing a lot of operations, which actually created fear and trauma in my life as a Palestinian child. I was like 8 years old when the first Palestinian Intifada took place. And here maybe I can share some photos with you, so maybe just give you a clear idea of what I'm talking about. So I can share this one here. It's actually an image from the first Intifada, which took place in 1987 in my town, Beit Sahur. And you can say it's the majority of the town is a Christian town, and you see the women, they took the lead in the first Intifada. When Palestine actually to take action against the Israeli military occupation, the people of my city refused to pay tax for the occupier. They refused to carry an Israeli ID. They no without representation, because Palestinian at that time, we had no representative in the Israeli government. We've been living under Israeli occupation. We didn't have our basic rights, our basic services. And the Palestinians decided to take this uprising or intifada against the Israeli military. And my father was one of these non-violent leaders, because this was like all non-violent action. And for me, seeing all these kind of demonstrations and the fully armed Israeli wearing kippah, for me, it was a big question, like, who are they? I was traumatized and I was full of fear seeing all these Israeli and soldiers speaking in Hebrew and wearing a kippah. And for me, and this is what I got as a child, like, these are the Israeli Jewish army. And hearing the Jewish army actually created a fear from the Jewish people. Like, for me, like, Jewish people are my enemy. The Jewish people are my occupier. And I got a lot of fear when I used to hear a Hebrew language, or when I used to see any Jewish symbol, even like menorah, or like the menorah, or the kippah. All these symbols of Judaism reminds me with the occupation as a child. And I got this also another challenge for me as a Palestinian Christian, going to the church every Sunday. And we read from the Bible, we read from the Old Testament, we read from the New Testament. So every time I used to open the Bible and read from the Old Testament, and I see like God bless those who bless Israel, and God will like curse those who curse Israel. So for me, it created another conflict. Like, how come I am praying for Israel? In the same time, Israel is occupying us. Israel is arresting my father. Israel is condemning like all these violent action against my people. So for me, was like confusing. This created a lot of trauma and fear in my. I just want to stop the share here, but anyway. So yeah, this created a lot of trauma and fear from what is called like Israeli Jewish people. And we never got to distinguish between Israel as a state and Jewish people as a nation, as a culture, as people. We never get the chance to do that. So, okay, stop my sharing here. So I grew up living in this environment, not only me, as every Palestinian, like Palestinian Muslim and Palestinian Christian used to fear Judaism. Because for me, for us, what Israel is doing is representing the Jewish people. And all the Israeli military we encounter in the checkpoints or encounter in our daily life, they speak Hebrew and they are Israelis and they are Jewish by religion. So like this is the first trauma I got as a Palestinian in my life as a child, like fear. And fear was always motivator for hatred, motivator for violence. So we got a little bit of hope when this intifada was over and there was the first Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement that was signed in 1993 between Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian leader, and Yitzhak Rabin, who was the prime minister. And here maybe I can share again the screen. So this was from 1995 when the peace agreement was signed in the White House with Bill Clinton between Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat. And Palestinian, we got a lot of hope that finally no Israeli military occupation, finally we will have two-state solution, that we will live next to each other, Palestinian and Israelis. We got a lot of hope. As a child in that time, I was 13, 14 years old. I got a lot of dreams, like finally I will have the access to go to the sea. Because as a Palestinian living under Israeli occupation, we were not even allowed to travel and go freely to swim and in the Mediterranean or the Dead Sea. So I was building a lot of images, positive images in my life after seeing this peace agreement happening. But unfortunately, my father was not happy about it. My father was really frustrated from the result, and I never understood why my father was frustrated from the agreement. But when I got deep into the details of the peace agreement and I saw the result of dividing the West Bank into 3 areas, A, B, and C, and what the Palestinian got is only 17% from the West Bank, which is like the dark brown area where you see it in the film. I don't know if you can see it or not. Yeah. So 17% fully under the Palestinian control, where the main Palestinian cities are located in the West Bank. Area B, which is 24% of the West Bank, where you can see the green area. These are Palestinian villages and towns, but it's a mutual control, Palestinian administration control, where they can provide services, and Israeli military control, like security control. Like no Palestinian police, no Palestinian National Guard can enter these cities. So imagine if there is a fight or any accident happened in Area B, Palestinian Authority cannot enter, or Palestinian police cannot go there, only Israeli military. Area C, which is around 60% of the West Bank, where the rest of the white area is located. This is fully under the Israeli military control, and this is where Israeli settlements, national resources like water, forest, agricultural lands, this is where actually is fully under the Palestinian control. And going from area A to another area A, imagine you're going from Bethlehem to Ramallah, you need to pass what is called a checkpoints. I will show you, like, yeah. First, Israeli government, they displayed red sign at the end of area A, where Israeli citizens, not only Israeli, but Israeli Jewish citizens are not allowed to get into area A, because in Israel we have an Israeli Arab citizen. So Israeli Arab citizen can enter area A and they can come to area A, but Israeli Jewish, it's dangerous for their life. This is how they promote it. And this is how the Israeli government are feeding the fear among their citizens. And this is what this is what we got from the peace agreement, more separation and more discrimination. The second issue, that Palestinian living in area A or Palestinian living in the West Bank, we've been identified with a green card, the green ID, green color ID, which means that we are not allowed to leave the West Bank without having an Israeli military, without passing Israeli military checkpoints or getting an Israeli military permit to cross to the other side. So more restrictions of movement, more separation, less control for Palestinian on the land, only 17%, which is around 2% from the historical Palestine. And we got a lot of military also, what we call them flying checkpoints, where when you are traveling from area A to another area A, crossing area C, not only permanent checkpoints, but you can see Israeli military jeeps stopping the Palestinian cars, checking the IDs, making more difficult for Palestinians to travel around the West Bank. Also, one of the issues that happened after Oslo Agreement is the water control. Palestinian, according to the peace agreement, we are not allowed to control our water aquifers and to get water from underground, and only to get water is to buy it through Israeli company. And this is why when you come to Palestine, to area A, the only way to distinguish between Israeli homes and Palestinian homes by looking at the rooftop, when you see these black tanks, this means these are Palestinian homes. And when you go to Israel, you only see these white tanks for the hot water, because we don't have access to water 24/7. We only get the water a few hours every 2-3 weeks. And now in the summer, it's one of our main challenges to get water. So whenever we get water, we just fill our tanks and use it until we get it again. But if you go to the settlements or to Israel, they have water 24/7, full access. They have swimming pools in their neighborhoods, and this water issue become one of our main issue. So this is actually the hope that we got from the Oslo Agreement. But when you see it, when you see the implementation on the ground and the result on the ground, I got to understand why my father generation were frustrated, because they did not see hope. They see more complication on the ground, more frustration. They didn't see any hope for two-state solution. They saw that Israel wants to control more land, more resources, and limited access for Palestinians, to put pressure on Palestinians just to leave. And what happened in the year 2000, when the Prime Minister of Israel, Ariel Sharon, decided to visit the holiest place for the Muslim, which is like the Temple Mount, and also it's called like a holy place for Jewish people. It was a trigger for Muslims, and actually it was like disrespectful for the Muslim people to see 4,000 Israeli military entering the holy site with their shoes to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And this was actually an enough reason for Muslims to start to fight the military and to start what is called the Second Intifada, And the second Intifada, which was more bloody and more violent than the first one, where Palestinians committed suicide attacks in Israel. Israel decided to reoccupy the West Bank again, so they re-entered Area A with their tanks and military jeeps with to do like a military operation to arrest more Palestinians and to attack more Palestinians. So we got into a violent circle again, and this was actually out of fear and out of lack of trust, because actually what happened after Oslo Agreement, there was a breaking in the trust between Israeli and Palestinian. We don't trust our partner. We have no partner for peace. This is how people see it. Like Israel, they saw there was no partner for peace because Palestinians are terrorists. They want to kill all the Jews. We want to push them to the sea. This is how the Israeli government are feeding the Israeli people. Like they are trying to promote that Palestinians are only a terrorist people. And this is why when they display the red signs, they actually were confirming that if you enter Area A, you will be killed. But actually, I have a lot of Israeli friends. They just don't care about these borders. They just come and enjoy like a meal with us in Bethlehem because they just see these borders are just fake borders that Israel want to keep controlling the Israeli citizen. And on the other side, we as a Palestinian, we always say that we don't have partner for peace because Israel did not commit to the peace agreement. And they are violating the agreements. They want to grab more lands and they want to build like more settlements. So after all this violence, Israel actually, and also one of the things that happened during Oslo Agreement is building of the settlements. Like the settlement was almost doubled than before Oslo. Many settlements been built after 1995. And this is also was one of the reason of the frustration of the Palestinian, and they see that we don't trust the Israeli anymore. So what happened in after the second Intifada, Israel decided to build a wall, the apartheid wall, and you can see the picture that they built the wall as close as to the Palestinian area in a way to confiscate more land for the Israeli side and to build more settlements. The wall was built around 25 kilometers deep inside the official border, which is the green line, like the West Bank border. And also Palestinian community being surrounded by a wall. If you've been to Palestine in Bethlehem, I'm sure you saw this wall surrounding many Palestinian communities and hiding Palestinians from Palestinians as well, and confiscating more land. So this was like after 2004, and for me, in the year 1999, I graduated from the high school, and I never got any chance in my school to study history. Like all the history that we study in our school as a Palestinian, the ancient history. Like we never get the chance to study about the current history, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or anything after 1948, because the criteria or the curriculum that we use is only Palestinians are allowed to study about the ancient history. So I know more about the Romans and the Byzantines and the Crusader, more about like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I always had this question, like why and who, what is the conflict about? I never get an answer, like why we are fighting these soldiers every day. So I decided to study political science, but unfortunately I did not get the chance to study that for several reasons. And I decided to stay in Bethlehem and to study in Bethlehem University travel agent management, because we were expecting the year 2000 to be full of tourists coming and visiting Bethlehem to celebrate the second millennium. Many hotels being opened, and we were expecting, like as I said, millions of tourists. But unfortunately, I graduated in the year 2001. in the beginning of the second intifada, where there was no tourism at all. And I decided to start volunteering with several organizations. And one of these organizations was the YMCA, and I'm sure you're familiar with the YMCA. And we started to do advocacy work and to share stories from Palestine to the international community, to share stories about our daily life and what's happening here, because we felt that the media is not showing the real picture of what's happening here. The media, we believe as a Palestinian, that the media is biased for Israel and not showing the reality from both sides. Like, if you want to see the reality, you should hear both sides and you should listen to both sides. So I was doing a lot of volunteer work with the YMCA. I did not work in any travel agent because there was no opportunity for me. But in the year 2007, I got to know about Holy Land Trust, which is a local organization based in Bethlehem, that they used to work on nonviolent resistance. And as a Palestinian, I believe in nonviolence is the only way to resist the oppression and the occupation. And I got very fascinated about the work that they are doing as Holy Land Trust, because in the year 2007, they started organizing what is called popular resistance. And this is one of the activity. I don't know if you're familiar with our founder, Sami Awad. He's here in the picture, dressing like Santa Claus during Christmas season. So Sami is the founder of the organization that he's committed to nonviolence, and he's committed to teach nonviolence for the Palestinian. So we, Land Trust, started organizing popular resistance, nonviolence resistance around the West Bank, mainly in Bethlehem, where we used to go every Friday after the Muslim prayer to go to different communities in the West Bank and to resist non-violently, to show the soldiers that they are against what you're doing in a non-violent way. And this is one of the Christmas season where we used to give candy for the soldiers and to say no for settlements and for restrictions of movement. So I joined Holy Land Trust in 2007, where I got fascinated in the nonviolence work they are doing. At the same time, they used to work with the international community by doing a lot of advocacy and awareness work with international community. We want to show the Palestine, we want to send the international community what is happening here. So they have, and the organization, what is called the Travel Encounter Program, where we organize tours, not only to come to visit the holy sites, not what we call it, the dead stones. We invite international to come and meet the living stones, Israeli and Palestinian. So in our tours, we organize like several days, meeting Israeli and meeting Palestinian, going to several communities, hearing stories, like first-hand stories, to get a clear picture about the daily life in Palestine and Israel, and to get to understand more about the conflict from your own perspective, not from international media perspective. So, this is one of the programs as well. So we used to focus on international awareness. Nonviolent is the basic method that we use in our work. In the same time, we focus a lot on healing the hatred that exists in our community. So if you saw these two sides of the picture, you see like Jewish children are like saying like demonstration and say kill them all, which is like kill all the Arabs. In the same time, you see Arab calling for like Israel be destroyed. And this is actually the hate that we grow up, and this is the hate that we are feeding. Actually, our governments are feeding us with hate and with fear. For me, as the scene I mentioned before, this is the picture I used to see Israel and the Jewish as like an evil. They are like, they want to kill us. And for the Israeli as well, like if when they see the Arabs as an evil, as a monster, they want to kill them all. So as an organization, we focus a lot on healing this hatred and fear by understanding the roots of the violence and where these roots coming from. So if you look at the history, we focus a lot on the roots of these violence, like where these fear comes from. And we see like what happened to the Jews in Europe and the Holocaust. It's carrying a lot of fear, carrying a lot of trauma, where the Jewish people, they actually feel they cannot trust everybody. And they don't want the same history to happen again, like it was happened and never again. And they are looking for a safe place to live without any violence. And this is how they see like Palestinian as a threat to their national security. In the same time, what happened in the Palestinian Nakba in 1948, when Israel was established, and there was like 526 villages being destroyed, and there was causing like what we are living in, like Palestinian refugees, like Palestinians actually left their villages and they became refugees until today. This has actually created also a lot of trauma and fear from Israel and from the Jewish people. We label the Jewish people as an enemy. So what we are doing as an organization, we focus a lot on the roots of these violence and how can we heal and how can we transform the individuals and the community to heal from the trauma and from the past and to see the possibility of creating a better future with a mutual vision for the future. Like we call this land a holy land, and we can see the diversity of people living together before 1948. We see like Jewish community, Palestinian Christians and Muslim living together. I used like my grandfather used to tell me that he has a Jewish friends living and coming and visiting him in Bethlehem before 1948. But what was the reason? What happened in the history that shifted this relation between Muslim, Christian, and Jew? So there was like an event that happened in 1948, which actually break all kind of trust and understanding between the communities in the Holy Land. So we have as well, like we have the Druze community, we have some Samaritan communities, we have the Baha'i community, that we have a diverse religion groups that they are living in this land, and we call this land Holy Land. If you ask any one of these groups, what is this land for you? It's a land was given by God to Abraham and his children, and we are the children of Abraham, that we should like trust. I mean, we are the trustees of this land. We should actually take care of this land. We should become a model for all the humanity, that we can live together and we can honor and pray for the same God that we are living in. But unfortunately, the way that Israel was established on a political agenda destroyed all these trust and relationship between the communities. And this is actually what we focus on the healing perspective when we organize a healing hatred retreats, when we bring Israeli and Palestinian from different religious background, just to talk about the commonality, like the mutuality, and what is our common background between us. And we see a lot of similarity between Jewish and Arab, Christians and Muslim. We carry a lot of culture together. We carry all our traditions are very related, or our food are related together as well. So we see the similarity between each other. In the same time, we try to understand the roots of the violence, like what happened to the Palestinians in 1948, and what happened to the Jewish people in the Holocaust, because this is something that we do not learn in the school. So what we do as an organization as well, we organize a retreat trip to Auschwitz and Birkenau, to the concentration camps in Auschwitz in Poland, where we sent Palestinians to go and see what happened to the Jewish people in the history, and just to understand the roots of this trauma and how can we go together into a healing process and to transform our life and to honor the past, but not to stuck in the past, because this is our human nature. We always see the future and we always judge the future based on our past experience. So if we have a bad history in the past, we always see a bad outcome in the future. And this is the equation for like Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We always judge the future because it's built on our past history. I will never trust Israel because Israel did 1, 2, 3, 4. And Israel will never trust Palestinian because Palestinian did 1, 2, 3, 4. We keep complaining and arguing about the past, and we are not seeing the future. So what we are doing as an organization, we try to have a future vision for both communities and how can we live together by honoring the dignity and by having an equal right for everyone. And what is our connection with this land? Away from the political agenda. We don't have any political agenda. Is it one state or two states? At the same time, we try to create a leadership, like a new leaders in the community that they can see what we called it non-linear leadership. So we give training for leaders in the community to see the future in a different eye, away from the past. Because I said like the linear thinking is that you judge the future based on your past experience. But what we are trying to teach these leaders is to see the possibilities that we have today and how can we make the impossible possible from the possibilities that we have today. And this is one of the the programs that we have, like leadership programs. We have nonviolent as the main method for resistance, the occupation and the injustice that is happening in our community. We focus on healing and transformation the community to create a shared vision. At the same time, we focus a lot in the international awareness. And this is why we have a lot of programs like home rebuilding, olive harvest. I can talk about it forever. And yeah, this is actually where we are today as an organization. We are trying to work with Israel and Palestine and to create this shared vision. So I can say I got healed after this long journey with Holy Land Trust, like 13 years of my spiritual journey with them. So I got to distinguish between Judaism and Israel, because Israel is not representing all the Jew. And what Israel is doing is not actually what Judaism is telling them. So occupation is not my Judaism. This is what I got to understand and to distinguish. And this is why I got a lot of Israeli Jewish friends that they are actually very supportive, and they are working together in a way to raise awareness among the Israeli citizens themselves about the Palestinian, because we need to change the perspective. And Palestinian cannot fight the occupation alone. We need to have an Israeli activist supporting Palestinian in resisting the occupation. And this is what we are trying to do now in our recent project. It's called From Dialogue to Action, where we are recruiting Palestinian and Israeli activists to go to the Jordan Valley to resist the occupation in support and in favor for the Palestinian communities who are living there. Because Palestinian communities in the Jordan Valley, they are facing a lot of injustice from the Israeli occupation. And we are inviting Palestinian and Israeli activists to go and work together to fight the injustice that is happening there. And also to show the Palestinian that we have Israeli are supporting you. So not all the Israeli are the occupier as well. Maybe I'll stop here about the Holy Land Trust, and I will just share more about, yeah, I have a lot of more personal experience. I can say that now, one of my leadership position in the community, not only the executive director for Holy Land Trust, but I was one of the candidates for the mayor election in my city 3 years ago. I got elected, but I did not get enough seats to be the mayor. I need to get 7 seats. I got 4 seats in my list. And I am a city member, like a city council member. So I have this leadership position where I try to influence my community, because one of the mistakes that we use in our media and in our language, like we use like the Jewish military, or the Jewish did that, the Jewish killed this person. And I try to change the terminology, that not the Jewish, it's the Israeli, because there is a huge difference when you say the Israeli military did that than when you say the Jewish did that. Because as again, what I'm trying to show, that what Israel is doing has nothing to do with Judaism. And as a Palestinian Christian, I believe in the Old Testament, and I believe that I have more Jewish blood than these new Israeli immigrant from Ethiopia or from Russia. I am more authentic Jew than the state of Israel. And I totally understand Judaism and I feel connected to Judaism, but what Israel is doing is totally different than what Judaism is. And this is what we really need to understand. And at the same time also, what these fanatic Islamic group like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, what they are doing, they are not representing the Muslim teaching and the Islam. And we need to distinguish. And it's all about awareness. It's all about like to heal and transform yourself from this terminology that we are inherited from our community. So this is my message today, that how can we look at the other as a human first, away from all the identities and all these label that we build in each one of us. So I don't know how much time I have more. I didn't count how. Okay.
I think there are probably lots of questions that people have, judging by some of the things that were being put in the chat and a couple of reactions. So that's certainly a very helpful start for us for now, and we'll sort of, I think, happily open it up to questions. So thank you, Elias, for that.
No, thank you. I'm trying to, just to stop sharing the.
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you. So there were a few comments, and there was one that was made to me about the fact that there are so many of us on this planet, and we all have our own perspective and our own experiences and our context and worldviews and traumas as well. And that if we're to live in a collaborative environment, we must recognize the personal validity of different narratives to individuals and find commonality to engage with and understand each other and to function with an environment of trust. And sort of, so there's more on that. So thank you for sharing that. Those of us that have been to Bethlehem have seen all sorts of different experiences, as well as some of the trauma and the stuff that Elias was talking about. One question, and I can see there are two hands raised, we'll come to them. One question that was submitted earlier was that someone else who's been to Bethlehem has seen the close cooperation between the Muslim and Christian communities in Bethlehem, but also very much aware of that, there's so much financial help that's needed in many ways. Do you want to say something, Elias, please, about the type of help that communities in Bethlehem could do with, or looking for support possibly from outside that others can get, our communities could give?
Yeah. First of all, there's, as I said before, like there's no difference between Christians and Muslim here. We always label ourselves as a Palestinian first, and there's no difference. There's a lot of harmony and cooperation. I have Muslim like neighbors and friends and workers at Holy Land Trust. And during this time, actually, with the COVID-19, we face a lot of difficulties, like, it's not only here, like it's an international issue that most of people, they lost their jobs, especially in Bethlehem, because it's depend totally in tourism. it's a tourist city where we have a lot of income from tourism, and many people, they lost their jobs. And now I think the poverty rate is increasing now, and the Palestinian Authority is not helping at all. They have no income to support Palestinian in this hard time. At the same time, like, yeah, our medical situation is not like the hospitals are not really well equipped to deal with these cases. So this is why, like, now Palestinian Authority and officials are like asking for support from the international community for the local people here. And we as an organization, we did this appeal in the beginning of the coronavirus, that we got some donation from international friends, and we provided food parcels for like families in Bethlehem, Muslims and Christians, especially also in the refugee camps. And we also got a donation, and we bought oxygen generators, and we provided them for local clinics and hospitals. So these kind of donations will help us as an organization also to provide services for the local community. Yeah.
Thank you. So I can see I've got two more questions in the chat, and also two hands raised. I know, Frank, you had your hand raised for a while. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question? And if we can make just anyone else who's asking questions, can we make our questions and not sort of too long speeches? Thank you. Frank?
Excuse me, my voice isn't as strong as it used to be. Elias not to realise that if the Arabs had accepted the partition plan, two-state solution 1948, by now we would have 72 years of an Arab state celebrating its independence. Every effort has been made to make peace, and each time the Arab population has resisted an attempt to acknowledge the connection of the Jews to the Holy Land. Also, if Arabs and Christians and Muslims and Jews and everybody else want to live anywhere they want in the Holy Land, why can't Jews? Why can't Jews live in Judea and Samaria or in the West Bank, just as Arabs live in Israel? And of course, as you know, there's over 2 million Arabs living in the state of Israel, Christians and Palestinians. So can we not have people living in both countries, both areas, and let's have peace and so on. And finally, the other point I'd like to make is this talk about fighting and going to resist the occupation is not likely to enhance the peacemaking with the Israelis. I mean, Israelis don't want to fight. I know you say that Jewish children, Israeli children are taught to hate Arab children. I've seen cases where Israeli children are scared when they see Arabs, because they've heard cases where they've seen cases where there's been murders, there's been all sorts of bomb attacks and so on. So please, if you want dialogue, have a proper dialogue with real Israelis and try and understand the attitude of Jewish people. The attachment to the Holy Land of the Jewish people has been there for 2,000 years. The Holocaust is not the excuse for the state of Israel. Zionism, the Zionist movement, modern Zionist movement started 120 years ago, but before that there were people coming back, returning to the land of Israel, even as late as early as 1856. There were more Jews.
Frank.
One final point, Warren. There were more Jews living in Jerusalem in 1856 than there were of any other group.
Frank, we're asking for questions, not statements, and I think you've asked 3 or 4 very good questions so far.
I just like Elias. I mean, I wish him well. I'm glad he's engaged in dialogue. But please engage with dialogue from a proper basis. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank. I think there were some of the points you made. I think Elias did address in what he was saying in terms of looking to dialogue and things. So, can you pick up a couple of those points, Elias?
Yeah, I just want to say about, I don't want to talk about the history. I don't like to talk about the past. I'm always like seeing the future opportunity. But what happened in the past, in 1947, there was a mistake from both sides when the United Nations come with a proposal to divide the land into 2-state partition plan. when the Arabs got 47% of the land and the Jewish 53%. It was rejected by the Arabs because before 1947, we were under the British mandate, and the land was, most of the property was for the Arabs family, and the Jewish, they got like minority, I can't remember the number, but it was like maybe 4 or 5% Jewish land. And during the British mandate, many Jewish family, they started purchasing lands from the Arabs. And this has actually created like fear from the Arabs that these are actually, we will become a Jewish state. And this is actually where the tension started between Arabs and during the British mandate. So yeah, like during the British mandate, there was like the tension started when there is like these Jewish agents started to purchasing land. I'm not justifying the past, but I'm just trying to show from my perspective. And as an organization now, we try to focus on healing the fear that we are inherited from the past. Just because we got all these perspectives, like I got the Palestinian perspective because I'm a Palestinian, and the Israeli, they got their perspective from school, from community. They taught us that don't trust Israeli, don't trust Jew. This is how we grow, like both communities. Like lack of trust is there. We cannot deny that there is lack of trust, there is fear from both sides. But we as an organization, we try to do this healing hatred just to focus on the similarity and the common background between both communities. I cannot deny that the Jewish history happened in Judea and Samaria. The Jewish people, they have more history in the West Bank than Jaffa and Tel Aviv. And they have more history in Hebron than Haifa. In the same time, we cannot deny that Muslim, they have the full right to practice their religion and freedom of worship in Jerusalem, which is considered one of the holy places for Muslim. And for me, as a Palestinian Christian, I do not see any attachment with the West Bank. For me, I feel I'm more connected with the places where Jesus was, which is the Sea of Galilee, Judea and Jerusalem. And Israel is not giving me my right of worship to travel freely and to go visit these places. Like I cannot go to Jerusalem every Sunday because of the restrictions of movement, because of my identity. I cannot pass the checkpoint without getting permits, which is something impossible to get. I cannot go to Sea of Galilee driving my car to just meditate and pray where Jesus was. In the same time, the Jewish people, they have the full right to come to Judea and Samaria and practice, but we need here to define, like we want one state or we want two states. If you want two-state solution, then you need to give equal right for everyone, for Palestinian and Muslim and Christian and Israeli to live whenever they want. Like as a Palestinian in the West Bank, I cannot live in Haifa. But there is an Arab actually who remains in Israel, and they live in Israel, and they happen to have an Israeli citizen now, but they are classified as a second-class citizen. So we have Arabs living in Israel, and we have Israeli living in the West Bank, but we are still, Palestinian and Israeli, they're still fighting for two-state solution. And we need to decide as a Palestinian and Israeli, do we need two-state solution? If we want two-state solution, then we need to get equal rights for everyone. Like both sides can travel freely without any restrictions. Israeli can live in Bethlehem or in Judea and Samaria. I can move to Haifa. My dream city is Haifa, but I cannot even go and visit Haifa because of this current situation. So this is how we are trying to achieve as an organization where we can understand the needs. Understanding the needs is one of the way of non-violent way to resist or to fight for injustice. Like what happened in the peace agreement, that both sides, they signed the agreement without understanding the needs of the local community. They just were focusing on drawing the maps, who control what, It was more economy agreement, like businesses between Israeli and Palestinian, like Palestinian Authority will control this, like Palestinian Authority will buy the water and electricity from the Israeli companies and then they resell it to Palestinian. So it was like a corrupted agreement that we did not get our basic needs, which is freedom of movement, freedom of worship, getting our basic needs. I hope I answered your question, but I can talk forever about it.
I have no doubt about that, and I wonder why. I've heard it suggested at one point that possibly because of the historical connection, that perhaps the West Bank should be taken by Israel and the rest should be given to the Palestinians. But we won't go into that now. That's a much of a bigger question. One question from someone who's thanks you for your important and informative presentation from Lawrence. Asked how you manage to reach people who don't already share the Holy Land Trust views, and of those who do attend, do you see their views changing on all sides?
So first, it's good to mention that we do our healing hatred retreats with an Israeli partners. We have like several Israeli organizations that they are partnered with us. In Jerusalem, like Rosing Center, we have the Hebrew Union College, and now we are doing our current program with Arava Institute. And they are fully in charge of recruiting the Israeli participant, and we recruit the Palestinian participant. The second challenge is that we are facing a lot of criticism by the Palestinian because of we are working with Israeli. And you know, the BDS and anti-normalization is big issue here, that Palestinian, they are attacking Palestinian organization who are working with Israeli. So we've been labeled as a normalization, you know, the term normalization, like you are making a normal relationship with your enemy and you're accepting the reality. But we are trying to reach out to the Palestinian and tell them that we are not actually making, we are not a normalization organization. We are trying to reach the Israeli community to share our vision that we are all can live together in equal rights and justice. But our main obstacle for achieving peace is, we have two obstacles. First is the roots of the violence, that we carry a lot of hatred and a lack of trust in our life against each other. The second is the Israeli military occupation in the West Bank is not helping in achieving any peace possibility in the future. So by ending the Israeli military first, we can see the possibility for the future. It doesn't matter if it's 2 states or 1 state or 15 states. What matters is like we need to end the occupation and to have equal rights for both sides and dignity for both sides. So when we share this, some Palestinians, they agree, they accept it, they like our vision and they join our activities, but still there is a group of Palestinians, they are not ready for that, they are not ready to listen to our vision. We've been attacked like 2 years ago by a cocktail, like Molotov bombs in our offices. It's really hard, like when we conduct a program, it's really very challenging for us to have a Palestinian organization partner in our projects. It's always like take a lot of effort and energy to talk to them and to convince them that what we are really doing is not a normalization. We are not asking Israeli and Palestinian to meet and make things normal and deny the injustices happening, because this is what normalization is. When you bring a group of Israeli and Palestinian young people to go and play basketball or to go travel to Cyprus together in 5-star hotel, that as if things are normal. But what we are trying to do is just we are trying to bring Israeli and Palestinian to face the injustice that there is something wrong is happening and there is violence, roots of violence we need to deal with and to heal it.
Thank you. I think you've sort of answered a couple of the questions that have come in within that, but I might come back to an offshoot from that. But there's one question from Jennifer who's saying, you've mentioned the traumas of the Nakba and the Holocaust, and how important is it to understand the history and the traumas and the roots with the land that go back beyond the 1940s, which you might have sort of addressed partly when answering Frank's question. But also, are you able to speak with and influence any of the Israeli and Palestinian leaders to learn and to enter into dialogue?
Yeah, this is what we are trying to do in the non-violence, in the non-linear leadership training. We try to recruit leaders in the community. We gave this training for 120 Palestinian leaders in the Palestinian Authority, like from the intelligence, from the police, from decision makers. We actually gave them this training to also communicate our vision. In the Israeli side, there's a lot of activities happening by our Israeli partners and organizations that they are trying to influence the leaders. And you can see that what's happening now in Tel Aviv almost every day or every week, there is a demonstration against the Israeli government because I think now there is a wake in the Israeli community that their government is not representing their voices. In the same time, here as a Palestinian, we are trying to reach the Palestinian Authority and just to show that the corrupted issues in the Palestinian community and that the Palestinian, they need to carry our voices and our needs as an individual. So we always try to reach these leaders in the community where they can be influenced in the community.
Thank you. There are a couple of people who are asking questions in relation to the either sort of the possibility of Jews to move around the Middle East, but also you've mentioned about addressing the question of the Holocaust and the tours to Auschwitz and that sort of it. But there was the question as well about the Jews from Arab lands, and then there's a very large proportion of those Jews who make up the population of Israel, and they also have memories in some ways like those of the Nakba. And do you think those have an influence in what's going on today in politics and the reality of the situation?
Yeah, I think now they are playing like a huge role in the Israeli community, and because they are coming from an Arab background, and they actually have like, it's not a majority, but they are trying like to influence in the Knesset and in the parliament. And we as well, we try to reach these Israeli Mizrahi Jew because they are like more into like Middle Eastern Jew to communicate with. Because we are from the same roots and like we say we have the same culture, but yeah, what they are actually as well traumatized from the Arabs as well, because what happened to them in the Arab countries after 1948 was not easy. Like they've been kicked out and they've been labeled as occupier, they labeled as betrayer with Israel, and they moved to Israel for safety, like from Morocco, Algeria, Yemen. And I think we need to reach more into these communities because we can find like a mutual way of communication together.
Thanks. There are a couple more in the chat, but I'll go to sort of Bernard. Do you want to ask your question, please?
I think Lucille was before me. She went off and then she came back again. So I'm going to defer to her.
Lucille, would you like to ask your question then? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Yes, I appreciate the commitment to non-violence by the Holy Land Trust. And while I think you don't want to concentrate on history, I would, not now, but I would ask you to consider why 48 and 67 happened. You seem to avoid mentioning that, but I'm not going to discuss that now. What I wanted to ask you really was about the future, and to see your vision of the future and to what extent you think it's possible to attain it if there were to be elections in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria, as they're called in Israel, given that the polls would show that Hamas would win very strongly.
And that links to a question I've been asked in the chat. In fact, do you see any future political leaders for the Palestinians who would be able to move things on?
Good. So, as an organization, we see that we are lacking of leadership. And this is actually the situation in the Palestinian community. We don't have a true leader that they can carry the Palestinian visions and needs. And this is why, as an organization, we decided to start this leadership program in a way to create a young leadership that they can actually be future leaders for the vision that we want. And the vision we want is to see is, again, is like an equal rights for everyone, the right for every community to connect and to live freely in this land whenever and wherever they want, without any borders or identities or beyond these identities. This is how we see the future we want. And to be honest, I'm not optimistic about the future election of the Palestinian community, because we have both sides are becoming more like radical in their thoughts. And the more violence and the more like lack of trust between Israeli and Palestinian will create a more radical generation. And we need to take action right now to stop that from happening. And we need to concentrate on the young generation to heal their trauma, because we are both traumatized. And what happened with the last Palestinian election, when Palestinians voted for Hamas, it did not come just from nothing. There was a reason why Palestinians decided to vote for Hamas. I'm not justifying that. I'm totally against Hamas agenda and their violent agenda. But because Palestinians, they saw no hope and lack of trust of the current leadership, especially after Oslo Agreement, they saw no leadership, no leaders are taking action in the Palestinian Authority, and they want to find an alternative. And the only alternative was Hamas. Unfortunately, the liberal parties in Palestine are minority, and they are not taking a decision, a leadership position. So we have Hamas, we have Fatah, and the third is the liberal communist parties, which is actually very minority, and they are not taking any opportunity. So the only choice was away from Fatah is Hamas. And this is why they chose Hamas, and they did not actually take action. So I see, like in the future, actually, I can't see any leader is ready to take the role in Palestinian Authority. And even Palestinians themselves are really frustrated from the system. And they are not ready to go for any election. Like even if there is an election, there will be like few Palestinians, like minority of the Palestinian community will go for election, because I can see the frustration and the depression from the Palestinian Authority and the corrupted system, and there's no trust at all. And many Palestinians now, they are calling for one state. It doesn't matter what kind of state. Is it an Israel or Palestine, or it's a binational state? Palestinians, they just want to live. They want to get their basic needs. They want to have basic salary to feed their families. This is the only concern they're facing now. They don't care about any political issue or any agenda.
Okay, thank you. I think Bernard, then I can see Malcolm's hand is up as well. And then I think there's probably one more to finish, although I've just noticed another hand go up, but we'll see. Timing, we'll see on timings. We're already very close to time. So Bernard, please.
Hi, Elias. There's so much I want to talk to you about, so that next time I'm in Bethlehem, I hope to knock on your door. I I support what you're doing so much. And I'm minded of the fact that when Moses took the Jews into the desert, there were probably very, very many similar debates, arguments, and fights that went on. So I sense we're in the 40 years, and that it's not our children that's going to do it, but it's our children's children who are going to grow up with generations more and more talking to each other. So no matter how difficult it is, for God's sake, don't stop. However, my sound went a little bit funny. So did I hear you correctly towards the end when you said you would look at the human first rather than the labels?
Yes, like
Okay.
look at you as a human without any identities, doesn't matter, yeah.
What I'm saying to you is I'm getting involved in quite a lot of interfaith work myself, and that is an attitude that I started with as well. But I found that very often the humans I was looking at didn't see themselves as humans. They saw themselves as labels, or with respect, in the way you put it when you first came on, as identities. So, you know, we each have our own world, notwithstanding we all live on the same planet. So I don't think we can ignore the identities. We have to engage with the identities and understand where they come from. So I differ from you on that respect. And I'm going to start looking at the identity, because very often it's the identity and culture that informs the humanity.
Yeah.
The second point is you made reference to the apartheid war. You can probably hear from my accent where I come from. Okay. I grew up in apartheid South Africa. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when the terminology apartheid war is used, you immediately, to my mind anyway, are creating an identity framework. And that identity framework, to me, goes straight into the delegitimization of Israel and the BDS movement. So as a South African who went through apartheid, I grew up in it, I fought against it, I did a little bit of time for it. I would really strongly advise you that if you want to get people like me to be willing to understand where you and your trust is coming from, and I do, because I understand that you didn't use the phrase in the BDS delegitimization framework, but there are other people who are not like me and who are going to switch off immediately and say, you're just interested in fighting the concept of Zionism. And as I recognize that the Palestinians are not going anywhere and they're entitled to an identity and a country within secure borders, the dialogue framework must also recognize that Israel and Jews, because it's been proclaimed a Jewish state, whether or not we accept it as a Jewish state, the fact that it's been labeled as such has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
There must be recognition that that's not going anywhere. So please don't stop. I'm not going to stop, but inshallah it will be the kids who will actually bring this about, because in the same way, and I'm going to finish off now, because in the same way it would never have been possible for Arafat and Sharon to do a deal. I'm not sure the current generation will be able to do a deal either, but the children have a very strong opportunity.
Thank you, Bernard. I'm not sure that was a question, but do you want to answer?
No, it wasn't. It was a statement. No, it was advice. It was advice. Label.
We'll take maybe the next question, and then I can just share a little bit.
Okay. And so, Malcolm, do you want to ask yours, please?
Yeah.
Can you unmute? Yeah.
Hello, Elias, can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you not think that the Trump plan, the main negative is it's called the Trump plan, do you not think that it is a basis for two-state solution? And also you haven't mentioned that there are countries like Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas who want to destroy the state of Israel. And they make no secret of that. So what do you expect the Jews to do in Israel when they hear this constantly, and the threat is constant? what do you expect them to do? But I'd like you to talk about this Trump plan, because I think the Trump plan has got a serious positive aspects, and I suggest you look at it carefully. I think it would give the Palestinian people much of what they want.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Elias?
Yeah. First, I'll just share about the apartheid term of apartheid is actually, we see it as an apartheid because it's not like we are illegitimating the state of Israel, but because according to the international law and the United Nations recognition that the two-state borders are the West Bank, the green line between Israel and Palestine. And the wall was built, as I said, inside the occupied territory, which is according to international law, it's illegal, and it's separating Palestinian from Palestinian. And this is why how we see it, it's an apartheid like system. This is that's why like we need to fight the apartheid system. Israeli and Palestinian, we need to be fighting for this. Not we are not we are not illegitimizing the state of Israel, or we are attacking the state of Israel. Because I'm fine if the wall was built on the green line, we're totally fine. We will not say it as an apartheid. We will call it a security wall, because it was built on a state border. But when it actually comes inside your border, your land, and separating you and actually creating an apartheid system within your country, it's an apartheid. It's a segregation wall. This is how I see it. But I'm not actually here saying that we are with the BDS, and also the BDS is another. They have another vision that they want to have a political solution, which is we are not fighting for any. We are, as an organization, we are not a political organization to decide is it two-state or one state, but we focus more on the roots of the violence and how can we heal that. And this will bring us to another, to the question of Malcolm, that about Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. We know that they have their own agenda of, like they always call the destruction of Israel, but I don't see like Iran and Hezbollah, they know more about our history than we do. And they don't know our needs as we do as a Palestinian. So I see the conflict as a Palestinian-Israeli conflict, that the solution need to come from Palestinian and Israeli. And if Israel and Palestine decided to sign the peace agreement today, they will force Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas to stop their agenda and to fight. Like we as a Palestinian, we need to stand in front of these agendas and say, we don't need you guys. Like if we decide as a Palestinian and Israeli to come with a peace solution that is equal for both sides and give us an equal rights, it doesn't matter if it's, as again, if it's one state or two state. So it's all about our decision as a Palestinian and Israeli if we need these people or not. In the same way that we see it as like why we need Trump and the US to decide on our borders. Like we see that the US government is a threat for the Palestinian. And this is how Palestinian, they see the US government is very pro-Israeli and against the Palestinian. And we know we don't need the White House to come and draw the map and the Trump plan in a way to give solution. Actually, I think we need to focus as first, the solution should come from within the Palestinian and Israeli community. And we cannot come with any solution if we keep, if we keep carrying this fear and hatred in ourselves. Like without transforming the individuals and the community and seeing the possibility for the future, we don't need any international intervention in our conflict. But we allow this intervention because we are not actually helping each other in coming with a peaceful solution. So this solution is allowing Iran to attack Israel, and we are allowing the US into attack in Palestinian at the same time. So, but for sure, as a Palestinian, we are in some degree we're against Hezbollah and Iran, and we say like enough is enough. Like I think our generation and the younger generation, they don't agree with any of these agenda. They just see that they want to live in peace, and they said like enough violence and enough war.
Thank you. I have one last question. I can see Herzl, your hand's up, and it went up quite late. If you can ask a 20-second question that Elias can answer in 30 seconds, then we'll take it.
Okay, I'll be very quick from Manchester. As one who's got grandchildren in Israel, it was a very interesting talk, Elias, really was. And my family have got lots of friends who are Arabs, and my daughter-in-law actually worked for an Arab company in Abu Ghosh. I think the problem, if I can crystallize it, is the total lack of trust between the Palestinians and Israel. And you, in fact, were saying, I want to go here, I want to go there, I want to pray in Jerusalem. And I think in the normal way, nobody's got any problem in Palestinians praying in the mosque, you know, the dome of the mosque. But I see the problem is, like I said, there's a total lack of trust. And the question is, how do you build that trust? If you have a peace treaty, there'll always be people on both sides. I don't like this bit, I don't like that bit. I think we as a community of Semitics, of Arabs and Jews, have got to think in maybe terms of 10 or 20 or even 50 years of creating a scenario and a situation where we go step by step, and each community begins to respect the other side, and we're not scared, the Israelis are not scared of having a bus blown up, and you're not scared of having your electricity cut off. If God forbid, if you could create a situation where you go in a small step, and each side would give a little bit, then the next generation, all being well, would understand that the Arabs aren't going to murder us. And you say, well, this way we can get water, or we can get electricity, or we can go freely to the Israeli hospitals. So that it would be a win-win situation. But don't let anybody think that this is going to happen under 10 years. Please God, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren will be eating hummus with your children in Hebron, or even Bethlehem.
I'm sure that was more than 20 seconds, but go on, Elias.
Well, it's a Jewish.
I just want to share, like, actually, about like freedom of movement and freedom of worship. This is something like, actually, it's not a fact here. Like, if you are talking about the Palestinians who are living in Jerusalem and Palestinian Arabs living in Israel, they have the right and freedom to go to Jerusalem every Friday. But Palestinians living in the West Bank, this is something impossible. And I never, the last time I've been to Jerusalem, maybe last year, last Christmas, because as a Palestinian Christian, I only get permit to leave the West Bank to Jerusalem twice a year, during the Easter and during the Christmas, like 40 days in each holiday. And I got this paper from the military to cross the checkpoint. So I cannot go anytime I want to these places, to Jerusalem or, but for the Palestinian living in Israel, they have the Israeli ID. They can travel freely within the state of Israel and within the West Bank. And this is what we are trying to do. Like, we want to reach out to a new generation. This is what we are trying to do as an organization in Palestine with our partners in the EU and in Israel, to just build more trust by just meeting each other. And because I've been to Tel Aviv like last Christmas, and like the waiters in the restaurant, they asked me, where are you from? And I just tell them I'm from here, but I don't speak Hebrew. They ask me like, why you don't speak Hebrew? I just tell them I'm from Bethlehem, from the other side. And he started asking me questions, like crazy question, like how is life over there? Like, do we have houses? Do we have cars? Like, they have a totally different image about the people who are living behind the walls. They just have no information who we are. And this is the only way to build trust, is just to bring people together. And this is what we are trying to bring people in Healing Hatred retreats. Then we invite them to for hummus in Bethlehem, and we go like to in a walk.
We look
So
forward to sharing hummus in Bethlehem with you, please God,
inshallah.
at least after the coronavirus. Well, you haven't said much about the coronavirus and how that's affecting things. And do you want to just add a quick word about that? And maybe as well, if there's anything else we could do, how could we support the work of the Holy Land Trust and support moves for dialogue and peace with you?
Yeah, so first, thank you. The coronavirus hits Bethlehem last March, on the 5th of March, from a group of Greek tourists. They were in Bethlehem in a hotel, and then they infected few of the staff. And then now it's spreading out every day. We have around 8,000 cases now in the whole West Bank, including East Jerusalem. We've been in a totally lockdown during the month of March and April. Only for a few hours, people can get out of their necessary needs. Now the Palestinian government are implementing a lockdown every Thursday to Sunday, with a very limited shops are open. We have the cases are increasing every day. As I mentioned before, our hospitals are not really ready to host this number of cases. We have around 100 people died. And this is why we need international support. And the economy is totally now collapsed in Palestine, because even in a normal life, Palestinians been suffering from economy, from the income. And now, even though during the corona, the economy is collapsing, many people are suffering from lack of income. We don't have a system like any other country that we don't receive any aid from the government. Even old people, retired people, in my parents, they are 70, in their 70s. We don't have a retirement, how you say it, retirement policy, that they don't receive any aid from the government. So I am in fully of charge of my parents and taking care of them. They are I need to provide medicine for them. We don't have a health insurance. We don't have a national health insurance for every Palestinian. If you want to have an insurance, you need to buy your insurance from a private company. So that makes it more difficult for Palestinians to get medical retreats if they are sick. So because Palestinian Authority are really, it's a weak government, I can say, that they cannot provide all the necessary needs for Palestinian people. And this is why, as an NGO, as a local government, non-governmental organization, we have a social responsibility. We started our campaign in collecting donation from international friends. We send a newsletter once a while, calling for support to provide medical equipments, or provide food parcels for families, or food coupons. In the same time, we want to fund for our programs, for the healing retreats, for example. All our money comes from personal donations. We don't have funders, an organization or government that they give us money. So we totally depend on individual funds that we send a newsletter or appeal, and they donate to our account, and we use this money for implementing the projects that we have. At the same time, they travel. We invite groups and people to join our tours, that you can find it in our website. And this is an income generating for the organization to sustain our work and to have an income from the travel program that we provide. So I invite you all to join and to check our brand new website that we developed during the coronavirus. Working from home, actually, we used our creativity to develop a new brand new website. which is holylandtrust.org. If you can visit that, and you can see all our programs, our vision and mission, and you can go also to the donation link. We will be appreciate that.
Thank you, Elias. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this afternoon. Elias, I think you've won over lots of friends who, if they didn't know you beforehand, they have been very moved by what you've said and how you said it, and the work that you and the Holy Land Trust are doing in many ways. Jane, would you like to say anything to finish? Also?
Thank you, Warren. I'd just like to echo your thanks and to say that one of the important things is that, and we've sort of mentioned this, we all come from our own perspectives. We all have our own experiences. We all have our own viewpoints. We've all had our own input. But the important thing is that irrespective of these different backgrounds, you've demonstrated, Elias, through what you've said and through the work that you do, that nonetheless it is possible for us to come together and to say that the only way we're going to have a future together is if we work together, irrespective of our backgrounds. So can I once again thank you very much. And I know, you know, as you've said, as you've hinted almost, said a little, things are very difficult for you, and we appreciate you giving up this time, and we do wish you all the best, and our prayers and blessings go with you.
Thank you. And yeah, if some people, they have questions and they didn't get the chance, you can email me anytime. I can maybe share my email on the chat room, and just you can email me anytime and we'll be happy to answer your question. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm also, I can answer yours that you only emailed me earlier.
Yeah.
So, thank you all. For those fasting on Tisha B'Av, we remember the tragedies that have happened to the Jewish people. It's Kal, a good and easy fast, and let's hope we all get through the coronavirus, the pandemic, and all violence, and so can work together towards peace and a good future with hope. Thank you.
Amen.
Take care.
Salam alaikum. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elias.
Thanks. Thank you for giving me this chance.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.